1923. The war, the First War was over, of course, been over 4 years, but I knew nothing about that, although we were born in Paisley Street, number 13, the top side of Paisley Street, and my mother and dad, I was the first one, and that made a big difference. As you found out, being the last one made a big difference to your attitudes to life, and it made a big difference to me because I was there when everything happened, and I had a great regard for my mother. I was, I was a bit naive as far as childbearing and the reasons for it. I think we all were a little bit that way in those days. Not that we believe the stalk theory or the gooseberry bush, but just to give an example of that, my mother and father must have had their honeymoon in Yarmouth. That's more than I had many years later, because I think I must have asked them where how did they get me, how did I happen to be here? And they found me in a bloater in Yarmouth, you see, and I believed that for a long time. I don't know whether I was too old or what, I'm a lot older, I don't know. But it was something that I became, when I found out, as I should have done, living in a small house in Paisley Street with 2 downstairs rooms and 2 bedrooms. You went up the steps and there was 1 bedroom on the left, 1 bedroom on the right, come down the steps, and there was the best room on your right coming down, and the living room. I suppose in a way, being the first child has its advantages really. I think obviously you get all the attention, which is probably not a good thing. But the disadvantage about being the first child is that you become aware of problems in the house, and I think you become probably a bit selfish in the process by expecting the attention. Not that I liked to see all the children coming, but in our family it became a bit much really. 8. And my mother was a worker. I respected my father, but there was something lacking in our relationship. I always felt he drank. He was always. I was early aware that he was taking far too much of the money in the house, which was a very small amount. And my mother seemed to be working non-stop from morning till night, and wasn't always very fit. She had an asthma problem, and she was looking after a large family and doing all the cooking. I'll talk about that later, about the cooking, because it was amazing really how she coped. And then my father would come home drunk at night, take his usual place in front of the fire, and where his pose was putting his hands out like this, I can still see him, which was to keep his hands warm, or his backside warm if you turn around the other way. And we didn't often see much of the fire really, especially when there were quite a few of us.
How many children were at home at one time?
Well, just actually Paisley Street, I don't know, I think I was about 16 when we left Paisley Street. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think we were I think I was about 16, so worked 16 of those who were sort of 55. I'm 71 now, so 55 or above were there, you know, one time.
So she,
So
Winifred and above.
well, actually, yeah, Mary was lucky Mary in those days, because Mary didn't seem to spend much time at home. In fact, I have more memories of Mary living in Batley than at home. She lived in Purlwell Lane, and Batley was only about 9 miles away, but to go see her in the shop with these two relatively wealthy, as far as we were concerned, wealthy spinster ladies, was you know, quite a day out really. And Mary was always you know, you'd see photographs of Mary always in a dance dress. She was put into concerts, and I think she had some training as a dancer in those days. And I can still see Mary in you know, photographs of Mary showing off her skills as a little dancer. I don't know why she did these concerts, but again, one of my most vivid memories of Mary and Purlwell Lane, and I can still remember it very well, was that there was a park near Purlwell Lane. That's where they lived. I just forgot the name of the park, but she had a tricycle, a little tricycle, and she used to say, "Come on," you know. I was her elder brother. I had to go, and I loved. We had very few toys of that sort, not in the house. I can't remember ever having a tricycle or anything like that. But I'm not grumbling about that. But Mary had, and going to this park, and it was a very steep hill, and one of our greatest thrill was sitting with Mary, two of us on a little tricycle, lifting our feet off the ground and speeding like mad down this hill, and then going back up and repeating it. And that spent 2 or 3 hours, you know, and went home and had some sandwiches and whatever, and a bit of a party, you know. It was to be a party, and a great thrill. But Mary was more like a cousin than a sister, in that she wasn't at home, but Sheila was. And Sheila was the next down the list, and Sheila had problems with me, and I had problems with Sheila. I think the trouble about an elder brother, I was quite bright at school, at St Joseph's, and I went to St Bede's when I was only 10 years old, and I think I got a bit of a problem. I don't know, a chip on my shoulder, maybe, one way of putting it. But Sheila used to annoy me quite a lot. I think living in a small house is difficult for two people living close together without you get on each other's nerves a lot. Why I'm saying that about 10, because when one of my biggest problems of all my young life was when I went to St Bede's, and we had only one room really. The other room was our best room, and I can hardly ever remember using it. It used to smell foisty, and nice, reasonable, for those days, reasonable furniture in it, but very cold, never used. We always lived in this other room, quite a small one, with a black fireplace, and everything. That's where we congregated. And no television in those days, of course, no radio even. But I had homework to do. That was when I found I probably got most grumpy, because there was no way to do it. And I was quite conscientious in those days. I was quite good at languages and maths. I was top of maths regularly. Another problem we had there was that there was, it was a good in many ways that there was all this calling going on, if you know what calling is. But our house had an open door, and it was, people used to just go and walk in, "Hiya there, Minnie," and come and chat, and I wouldn't say anything, I probably should, but it boiled up inside, and I thought, God, I've got to do this. Oh. And some of the people, like the Boydles, would make remarks about me, and it got them, it just got on top after a while.
And they wouldn't let you use the other room at all?
Well, they would, but it was cold, it was never, in winter especially, it was cold in there. Yes, there was no doubt I could do, and probably I did, I think I did, but I probably tried to get where the fire was, somewhere near there, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the bedrooms, you can imagine what they were like when they were yours. My mother and Dad had their own bedroom on the left-hand side, going up the steps, and then we were on the right. And again, that, obviously, looking back, I mean, it wouldn't happen today, but that caused, we're all very, I think the Rayners were very shy and modest, really. We're brought up that way, and it affects you all your life, really. We, in spite of the fact that there were girls, boys, and with no privacy, no bathroom at all. You never saw any girls, your sisters, naked or playing harsh, and vice versa. And it was, in one way, it's a good thing, but in many other ways, looking back, it's amazing how you coped with it. It's very difficult to cope with that kind of thing. And again, being the eldest, you're sooner aware. You're sooner aware of that kind of problem than the younger one in the family. And I got a little bit anti-father. My mother, I thought, was doing far too much and making herself ill. I mean, she was a weaver. She used to go out to weave, cotton, and then come home, and then she'd bake, and all the bread loaves were in front of the fire there. And I knew the day. The timetable was always the same, immaculate, really. Because she'd do everything on a certain day. I mean, I knew the food was incredible. My mother's food was, looking back, I don't know how she managed to do it, but every weekend she'd buy a big joint, and on Monday we'd have cold meat and hash, warm up we called it then. And Tuesday would be, I knew, coming home from school, I knew that it'll be meat and potato pie tonight. I used to put a little egg cup at the top to make it rise above it,
Yeah.
And Wednesday, I think the bread would be out.
I remember the pies.
Yeah, and then being the eldest, again, which caused some resentment, I understand it. But you don't say, I was probably treated food-wise sometimes. In fact, I know a little better than some of the others. Notably when fish and chip day, which was always Friday, we never had meat on a Friday. We had to go to Denison's fish shop, and I usually went. And I got to the stage where eventually I might have, instead of chips, cake and chips, which cost up the same thing. And then fish and chips, I was full of fish. That was a great thrill, you see, and this is what children don't get these days. They don't get any thrills about things like that. When you're poor, you appreciate the little extras that somebody can buy. And the food, I mean, this, talking about food, when we were married, and you were around about at that time, we still talk about it, the fact that my mother didn't bat an eyelid when we rolled up with our kids, and Sheila rolled up with hers, only one, and played cards, and we would expect to stay for our tea. We would expect that Peter was a glutton. She used to do jam tarts and lemon curd tarts and some sponge buns and all that, and go all around a lot. And always this big joint of meat, she carried that on. And she could feed the 5,000, you know, really. And we can't, I mean, when we, if anyone, I mean, it's gone altogether now, but that didn't used to happen in our house alone. It used to happen all over. People hadn't television, so they used to go and say, "Oh, come on, let's go and, it's a nice day, let's go and see my mother," you know. And mother would have to put up with it all, and they did, and happy about it. And you didn't say, "I'll come next Sunday," but because you didn't know when you were coming, but you might, you know, on the last minute. And never, you can't rent the phone nowadays. You couldn't say, "I'm coming, Mum. Can I come?" Or "Can I come?"
Yeah.
You just went, and out of the cope. I never knew. I mean,
who was the next after Sheila then? Was it Francis?
Francis, I think. Yeah.
But you would have been a bit older by this time, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah. As I say, you know, well, I think when you're thinking about how people were, so if you talk about people, I think you've got to put them in a context. Really, I think you've got to take account of where they were in the list. I think it makes a big difference. I think when you've got older brothers and sisters, they set an example, or perhaps not, but at least you're aware of them, and they can do things for you that you know, being eldest, nobody does for you apart from your mother, which is great. But have I gone on too long?
No. I'll just check that.
Getting back to attitudes to your family, see, I remember my mother used to the rent of that house. And my job being was to take the money to top of the Cleveland Street, top there of the house. Obviously, the fellow who owned the place. He was and I took it. And when my father worked at the Alexandra, in Bradford, he used to get it. He must have got paid every Saturday morning, because my mother used to say to me, "Will you go for your dad's wage?" And that sounded very strongly in my mind. And I always think it was Winifred, but that I used to take in this pram, this white pram, big pram with big wheels, and you could take the bottom out, where the child laid through 3 sections, and you could hide things under there and then put the child on top. And I used to have to take this pram with the child in, I think it was Winifred, down to every Saturday morning, down up to Park Lane, down Park Lane, on Edmund Street, I think, and then eventually get to the Alexandra opposite the swimming pool, and go down the cellar. My father was a cellar man, and he'd be there with a cigarette and give me the way. He might give me a drink or something, I don't know. And then I came back, and this pram, I didn't like doing it really, but trying to make the most of it, this pram became a kind of a motor car for me. And I think I've told Winifred or somebody this. I used to come in back down one of the steep roads. I once let the thing go and see how far I could let it go and get it back, you know, with a child in there. It was a very dangerous, stupid thing to do, but you know, used to play that kind of. I used to play that kind of game with myself. I don't know if anybody else does, but I'm sure they do. And this is how it became bearable. This going. I used it as a kind of. I remember later on the same kind of subject. I was stupid, obviously, but I used to like cycling a lot. I got a bike on my 10th birthday. My Uncle Jim bought me a bike. And I didn't know I was getting this bike. It had a motorbike accident. And I've never had a bike in my life before. And he got some money for it, some compensation, because of this accident. And I don't know whether he had a soft spot for me or not, I don't know. I must have had it at the time, because he once said to me, 1933 it was, 10th of May 1933, he said to me, go down to Halford. Would you go down to Halford and just tell them who you are? So I thought, all right. So I went, Halford at that time was the bottom of Manchester Road, on the right hand side. And I went in and I said, I'm Jim Rayner. My uncle told me to come and just say, I'm Jim Rayner, you know. And just a minute, went to the back and brought this bike out, and I can still see it there. I couldn't believe it, really. It was a straight handle one. And they said, this is yours. And it went up in my estimation. Now I thought, well, I couldn't even ride the thing. I remember bringing it back home and then going on Trinity Road, which was a pretty flat road, and eventually I fell a few times, but I got off. So much so, this is a true story, that on the 26th of June, the month after, 1933, some lads around there had bikes where I lived, and they decided to go to York. And I said, well, I know a lady. I was taken by my grandma to a farm called Sutton on the Forest, which was 8 miles beyond York. I'd been there a couple of times, and my grandma stayed with Mrs. Longthorne, and she took me on a couple of, and I thought it was absolutely marvellous, out of this world, really. And this lady had a boy called Percy Longthorne. They were quite well off compared with us, obviously. But on the 26th of June 1933, I was 10 years and 1 month. I persuaded these lads to go, without telling our parents, to York, to this. I built up this vision of Mrs. Longthorne's farm, and there was an orchard behind with apples in, and I thought I built up this lovely story about how well off we'd be if we could get to this York, you see, on a bike. And we set off. My mother, I just said to my mother, we're going for a run. Can I have some sandwiches? And I put them in the bag, the bag at the back, and I remember saying, I don't know, I'm silly, really, but I've told this kind of thing to the children at school, because it was true. I used to say to those sandwiches, aren't you lucky, you know, you're going a ride to with me in this bag of, wrap them up, you know, and we'll be off. And I've got all these stories I call Johnny Green stories. I mean, it's always about Johnny Green, but the children say, I think Johnny Green is you think. But anyway, we got to York, very tired, and then we got onto the road to Sutton on the Forest, which was through a place not far from the football ground, I remember that, Cadbury's Works, and through Stremslow, I think it was. And eventually, I saw this on my own steam. No, that cost me a penny. The farm, you see, Mrs. Longthorne was there. She was always in doing something in the farm, and we got there. I said, these lads were older than me, and I said, hello, Mrs. Longthorne. We've come to see you see, but she couldn't believe it really, but anyway, typical Mrs. Longthorne. She had a table outside, and she brought us some tea and some sandwiches and scone, and the sun was shining, and it was absolutely brilliant. You know, we'd arrived there, but we left it far too late then. No lights on I was absolutely jiggered, and two of the bigger lads had to come each side of me and support me to keep on the bike, really. And I remember we got to leave, and the policeman stopped us, and because we'd no light, and my mother apparently was going berserk. looking around all the streets. But eventually, I don't know what time it was, midnight maybe, we got home, and that stands out very vividly in my mind. But we